Now that we have a general understanding of what grids are, let's just go through a couple of options that we have in Figma. It's honestly one of the most advanced ways I've seen a design tool implement something like grids. So if you click on a frame, and it has to be a frame, you're going to have these options on the side. It's called layout grid, and if you go inside, you're going to be able to add a grid. So I'll just remove it for now so that we can kind of demonstrate different options. But in here, you're going to have three things. One of them is going to be a grid, columns, and rows. As I've said, most often when we're talking about grids as designers, we're referring to the columns that we're using. So in here, you have a couple of options. This one is going to refer to how many columns you want. As I've said, most often it's going to be something like 12. Color, I'm not sure you're going to change a lot. If it's not working with your background, you can switch it to basically anything else, and here's the opacity for it. When it comes to the settings, by default, it's going to be put on stretch, which means that it's going to start on the left edge and it's going to stretch until the right edge of the screen. You might want it at times. Most often you're going to want to introduce some kind of a margin on the left and right side, but just know that if you're using a stretch grid, that means that basically if your screen is something like 1280 pixels, which is on the lower side of desktop screens, you're going to have a left and right padding, and the columns are going to be really squeezed in. But if you have a large display, like 2000 plus pixels, that means that you're going to have the same margins on the left and right side, but the columns are going to be bigger because there's a lot more space on the screen to fill it in. So you have to decide if you're designing with stretch in mind or if you want to actually center your columns. If you decide to center them, that means that the left and right margins are going to be dependent on the size of your screen. For example, if you have a really large screen, that means that you're going to have really big margins on the left and right side. But if you're working on a smaller screen, the margins are going to be smaller. The content is going to be contained in a sense, and developers often use the term like a container is something that's kind of keeping that's kept in the middle section of the website. And most often, if you want to ensure that the width of your elements on the screen and the width of some images or cards or whatever is placed exactly at some point in the grid, and that it's also the exact width and height, you're most likely going to be using that kind of a container-like grid that's keeping the content in the middle of the screen, and the margins are the flexible parts. Again, depending on the type of project, maybe one strategy is better, maybe the other one's better. And I'm going to explain some pros and cons later on in other lessons, but I'm just trying to explain like what the difference is in here. So as soon as you switch to center, you can now see that you can actually control the width of the columns. So you can make them something like this. Since I'm using a pretty small screen with a width of 1080 pixels, which is more like a social media post, I'm going to use a smaller number in here. And basically the container width is going to be 12, which is the number of columns, times the width of the columns, plus 11, because there's 11 gutters between 12 columns, times 24, which is the width of the gutters. And then you have this container that's going to be 936 pixels wide. And now you can see as I stretch the screen, basically the content stays in the middle. So it's something that you're going to use if you really want to have a big control over how wide elements are in your interface, and that they work well with either like typography that you chose and the sizes that you chose there, or some other elements. Another type of grid that we can have can be based on rows. So instead of columns, you can switch to rows, and you can kind of define how many rows you want your designs to have. It's not something that I'm honestly ever using in web design. I might use it on mobile design if I see some kind of an advantage to making that screen follow certain hard guidelines. I do use it on social media posts and those things that we're doing on Supercharged Design, because it allows us to maybe better align some things to the grid. So when you're swiping through content, it feels like things are visually in place. But again, rows, not something that you're going to use for UX UI work a lot. When it comes to the grid, this is something that you can turn on and off. Honestly, to me personally, it kind of bothers me. So I don't use it too much, but grid can help you actually place like every single element within the system that you've set up for yourself when it comes to repeating blocks. So I don't know, if you're working on some kind of a visual and you want to ensure that basically everything is placed on that kind of point grid that I mentioned in the last video, be it 4, 8, 5, 10, whatever your perfect base number is, you can place it in here and you can then ensure that. Since I use it most often for spacing within the main elements, I don't really want to have it across my entire screen and design, so I don't turn it on a lot of times. When it comes to the reasons why I mentioned 4 and 8 as some of those great base numbers to work with, a lot of the screen widths that we have right now, mobile, desktop, tablet sizes, most of them are actually divisible by 8. So that's one of the reasons why it's really popular. A lot of the design systems follow it as well. A lot of the icons that you're going to find online and icon sets are kind of using either 20 or 24 or 32 or 16 as kind of the base. So you can see that most of the time it's going to be either divisible by 4 or 8. I mean, everything that's divisible by 4 is by 8 is also divisible by 4. And I often use 8, as I've said, on like tablet and desktop designs. For mobiles, I do need more flexibility, so 4s I would often use as well. And another reason why it's really popular is because you can divide 8 into 4s, into 2s, into 1. So it gives you a lot more flexibility there. Well, if you had something like 5 as your base number, if you had to divide it, it's immediately going to be 2.5. So that kind of introduces those half pixels that you want to avoid. Okay, so columns, rows, grid. And finally, there is also another type of grid that is sometimes mentioned, and that's the baseline grid. So if you're working in Figma, one way to create it is to go to rows, and the count of this, instead of like 1 to 12 or whatever number, you can put it to auto. So as long as this screen is getting longer and longer, new rows are going to get introduced. And this is called the baseline grid. That means that when you're working with typography, a lot of the times you want your line heights to be a particular number. I plan my line heights, not font sizes, to be divisible by 4, so that they can fit better on this baseline grid and kind of introduce that sense of rhythm and harmony with all of my elements in designs. So I know that some of the things that I'm sharing, especially in the illustration part and now with grids, are kind of advanced UI topics, but I want to give you the basis as we're working with Figma, because this is the advanced Figma course, and I want to make you understand why I'm making some decisions when I'm working in Figma, because they're based on the things that are working well for UI design. And UI in design is impacting UX design and the experience our users have, so it's kind of like a neatly connected story of all of those things. I'm not just going to teach you how to use Figma, I'm also hopefully giving you some real life tips and tricks on how to be a better designer and how to use Figma as a tool to be to your advantage and to be a better UX UI designer, product designer, whatever your role is. Hopefully it's going to help you. Okay, so one way to create the baseline grid in Figma is to use rows, put this to auto, and then just kind of use your baseline number, which is basically the line that all of your text is going to fall onto, to create this kind of a repeating grid. I often just put height and gathers at the same size to be able to create it. You can also put gathers at something like, well, maybe 0. And then you're going to see that it's just going to introduce those lines in here. It's up to you if you want to introduce it or not. Since most of the time I'm actually going to space things with the numbers of like 4 or 8 in mind already, I'm not going to really have a baseline grid showing in my designs. Again, a lot of it is going to be my preference and something that I like to use, and I'll try to explain why. Honestly, it's like just too much visual noise for me to focus on things. But if it's helping you work better and align things better and introduce more consistency and hierarchy into your designs better, like, go for it. Just know that the ability to introduce those things is in here. It's available in Figma, and it's up to you to either use it as an advantage, but if it's more of a distraction like it is for me, then kind of get rid of it.